As I walked up to her apartment, I was terrified. I knew I had to do it, but I didn't want to. I had lied so much, though, I just needed to come clean about all of it. Thinking back to that fearful moment, about how it took me so long to come clean, I am reminded of where I first learned to hide and to lie. The Brotherhood. I have been best friends with the same 6 guys since I was in elementary school. We called ourselves the Brotherhood because, well, we were cool. We all grew up in the same 3-block neighborhood in Chicago, all came from pretty stable families, and from the outside, you would have said that we were all good kids. But that wasn't the full story. As we got into high school, started to grow, we started to make decisions that we knew weren't healthy and made excuses for them. We played the video games with all the murder and the blood, watched the movies our parents told us not to, started watching porn, started talking about the girls at school, or more specifically, talking about their bodies and what we would do to them if we could get the chance. But we hid all of it. We lied to our parents about the drug and alcohol use. We lied about the shit that we did to and with the girls in our lives. It was not an explicit choice to hide or to lie. We didn't call a group meeting and come to a group consensus about what and what we would not lie about. We just followed each other's lead. By default, we affirmed each other's deceit. But I vividly remember wanting to choose unwisely, because that desire never really goes away. I constantly wanted to satisfy my immediate desires, even though I knew it wasn't healthy. I felt weak for lacking the willpower to make the healthy decision, to choose the healthy over the unhealthy. But I didn't want anyone else to know that I was struggling with this. So I started lying to myself to convince myself that those unhealthy problems, those unhealthy decisions were okay. I'm not getting drunk to avoid my problems. Those violent video games aren't making me violent. None of this stuff is actually a problem. But I also still wanted to be genuine in my relationships. So I faked it. I learned how to share just enough of myself to claim to myself and to the people around me that I was being vulnerable. But in the Brotherhood, we kind of knew we were lying to each other. Yet when your best friends in the world don't call you out on your lying, but actually join in, it just starts to feel like a support system for deceit. And the excuses we made turned us defensive. We couldn't take critiques, even from each other, because that would have disrupted the narrative that we'd already worked out in our heads. At one point, we tried to confront one of the members of the Brotherhood about his drinking problem. We brought up the issue, and before we had even gotten a full sentence out, our friend decided to lay out his entire reasoning about how he wasn't drinking too much, he had everything under control, and as a matter of fact, he was fine. He was actually improving. He had answered the problem before we'd even stated it, because he'd already thought of it himself. Lying about not doing homework or turning off the R-rated movie when our parents walked in the room quickly over time grew into me lying about how I was struggling in my schoolwork, how I didn't feel like I had a character that I could be proud of. And one way I internalized all of these little choices into something more chronic and systemic is that I began to believe that when I hide things, when I bury things, that I look normal. In other words, I believed that pretending made me more human. But I was really acting like the kid who doesn't feel like making his bed, so he just throws the pillow and the sheets on the bed and then nicely lays the covers over the whole thing, as if a clean set of sheets, a clean covers will cover up the lumps underneath. My last girlfriend saw through the clean covers. We were together for over 2 years. She was the first girl I ever loved, and I did not want to screw it up. All my female friends in high school used to tell me that I was one of the good ones, whatever that meant, but that message got burned into my brain. I had to be the good one. I was her first boyfriend. I was the first person she had sex with. I was the first person to tell her that she was beautiful. I was the one who was supposed to protect her, to make her feel happy. I could not screw it up. But I screwed it up. I screwed it up when I started hiding stuff from her. I remember her asking me to be vulnerable with her, to tell her what was going on, and I was like, I am. Can't you see this meticulously placed systematic vulnerability that I'm giving to you right here? Isn't that enough? But she could obviously see it wasn't authentic. She could see the lumps under the covers. And I knew I had developed guarded, dishonest habits, but I hid that from her. I hid it from myself. I didn't want her to see that part of me. I hid it by sacrificing my own growth for what I thought was good for her until it broke me. I hid how much I watched porn while we were dating, how I felt like I never had enough space to myself, but I never voiced it, how I felt like I wasn't as happy as I thought I could be. I remember wanting to tell her the truth, but then thinking, that wouldn't make her happy. She doesn't need to worry about this. No, I can bear that myself. This would just hurt her anyway. Hiding that shame and refusing to be real with myself, or anyone else for that matter, was not sustainable. It made me unhappy. It made me sad. But I didn't want to admit that shame I was feeling. I got to the point where it was gnawing at me, kept me up at night, distracted me from my daily life, made me vulnerable in my relationships, or unavailable in my relationships, and it was killing me. All the hiding was killing me. So as I walked up to her apartment to come clean, I was petrified. My hands were shaking. I felt nauseous. I didn't want to do this because I wasn't just coming clean to her. I was being vulnerable, not systematically, not meticulously, not where I could form the vulnerability and then hand it to her, but really completely, authentically vulnerable. When she let me in, I sat her down and just said, I lied to you. She already knew. I told her about all of it, all the actions that made me ashamed of my character that I hadn't told her about before. I tried to lay out everything, the porn, the insecurity about myself, how much I disliked my own character for not making healthier decisions, how my shame was built on a history of denying my conscience what I knew was healthy for the immediate pleasures. When I told her all of this, I felt this simultaneous gut-wrenching pain, and at the same time, that shameless vulnerability somehow felt good. It wasn't fun, it wasn't comfortable, but it felt good to choose deep, true honesty. That night I started to really grasp the fact that the only way to have a truly strong relationship with another person is to be vulnerable with them. And I remember giving her a list of 24 reasons about how I hadn't been honest, but the biggest one was this. A year into our relationship, I cheated on her. I was coming back from Chicago on the train, and this girl came and sat next to me. She flirted. I flirted back. I knew it wasn't smart, but I had a temporary desire in that moment, and I didn't say no. She gave me her number, and when I messaged her, it didn't take long for her to ask, what would your girlfriend think about this? I told her to forget about my girlfriend. We sexted back and forth for about a week, and I actually started to make plans to go visit her. That whole week, I felt this cringy feeling in my stomach. That conscience I had developed as a kid and just pushed away was screaming at me to stop. But she was attractive, and so I tried to just push my conscience down. After about a week, though, the feeling got to me, and I realized I didn't want this, and I ended it. I blocked the girl on everything, and to this day, I can't even remember her name or what she looks like because I buried that too. My girlfriend and I dated for over a year after that because I convinced myself that I could even marry her without telling her. I convinced myself that because I hadn't actually slept with the girl, that I was in the clear, that I was okay, and that I was actually strong for having ended it. The defensive instincts I developed alongside the brotherhood kicked in, and I had reasoned my way into what I believed to be a perfect defense, a perfect excuse. But I am still a proud member of the brotherhood today because we are working to challenge each other and deal with the parts of ourselves we'd hidden so far in the past. But what I wish I had known sooner is that by refusing to let myself feel my own shame, I was stopping myself from feeling anything. I was trying to selectively choose which emotions to feel. I'd pick up happiness and joy and pleasure, but I'd try to push away shame and guilt and fear. But that's not how human beings work. I didn't realize that in order to really feel joy and happiness, I had to let myself live in the shame too. Hiding so much can make us men hard or closed off or violent, removed, arrogant, aggressive, defensive, angry, apathetic, misogynistic, criminal, vulgar. But when we do that, we don't just hurt ourselves, we hurt the people we love too. We manipulate, we can lie, we can cheat and betray them. And we have to stop hiding, because when I walked up to my girlfriend's apartment to tell her everything, despite the clammy, shaking hands and the sinking feeling in my stomach, I was so sure that what I was about to do was right. And in that moment, I wasn't hiding, and I wasn't ashamed. Thank you.